Hello, welcome to the Signal and Noise podcast. You've already noticed that it is your co-host Andrew DeSillis, not joined today by Brian Lamar, who is off meeting with our Viral Youth clients in person, but excited to host this episode. The first time I've done a solo episode. Normally I leave Brian out in the cold when I'm visiting clients, but the roles are reversed today. Really excited to be joined by Joey Maddox and Sebastian Babis from Verisoul. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Doing well, doing well. Great to be back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me for the first time. First of many, I hope.
Yes, and Sebastian, I think that the last time we recorded an episode with Verisoul, you were not yet part of the Verisoul team. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your role at Verisoul?
That's true. Yeah. So super happy to be here. I've been at Verisoul for about 5 months now, but before that was super familiar with the team and the product. I actually came from Morning Consult where I led our buying team. I was on a strategy team there, and I was a Verisoul user back in the day. Loved the product, loved it so much. I actually reached out to Joey and Henry saying, "Hey, maybe I do this full time." So here I am, super happy to be on the team.
And I will say on that front, it was the best cold outreach email I've ever seen, either sales or employment or anything. It was an awesome message, and it was pre-Series A too. So Sebastian was very bought in on the company. And at the time we weren't even hiring. This is back in maybe October of 2025. So we weren't even looking to hire, and the message was just so good. We're like, okay, when we start to hire, Sebastian will be the first call. And then we raised a Series A, reached out in January, quick interview process, and then joined in March.
Love that. And what an excellent kind of transition for you, Sebastian, going from user to a team member, familiar with the product, and of course, familiar with the user experience, user pain, all that kind of stuff. That's a great connection. And Joey, you're obviously one of the co-founders, but to refresh our audience, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at Verisoul?
Yeah, so actually slightly different. First employee. So first
Okay,
employee.
first employee. Got it.
My background's it's kind of a roundabout way to coming to Verisoul. So I knew two of the three founders from school, from UVA, and then I actually worked at Bain and Company with the CEO Henry Lagarde, and then I went into private equity. When I was there, I was the first angel investor, one of the first angel investors in the original batch in Verisoul, and so I got to see the journey kind of end to end. And when I was just an investor, I was getting all these updates about the company trying to find product market fit. And so in 2024, I started to see a ton of traction. The emails were getting a lot more exciting. There's a lot more
Mhm.
news they were reporting. And at that point, I actually made the jump, left the PE fund that I was at, and joined as the first hire.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And your role as first hire, you seem to me to kind of be like a little bit of go to market, a little bit of CMO, a little bit of COO. What does your day-to-day role look like?
Right. Yeah. I'm the chief strategy officer, which can mean everything and nothing all at once. But at Verisoul, what it means is, yeah, essentially kind of running go to market. What's interesting about Verisoul, we don't just target one vertical. So
Hmm.
obviously, a ton in market research, but we also work with ticketing, gaming, advertising, AI software, a bunch of other verticals. A lot of my role is trying to figure out, okay, where can we actually find product market fit? Where is the Verisoul product best served to solve the problem across a bunch of different verticals. And so I was around when we first decided to move into market research. I joined again in 2024, back when we had only one or two market research customers, and now we're up over 70. And so really, we've kind of doubled down in market research. And obviously, my background being at Bain, I've actually seen survey fraud from kind of that lens and been a buyer of market research where there was fraud. But anyway, my day to day is in part working in some of our kind of core existing verticals where we have a ton of traction, market research being one. And then the other half is trying to figure out, okay, what's the next vertical where it makes a ton of sense? So, for example, we were just out in San Francisco at a conference called TrustCon, where we have customers in the trust and safety space. So, helping prevent like CSAM uploads and people posting spam in social media profiles and things like that.
Very interesting. That's cool. Yeah, and obviously, the technology has applicability in all kinds of spaces. So I'm sure that that makes it difficult from a go-to-market standpoint when you have so many areas of traction. And I cannot imagine how different a market research buyer would be from a California tech company. So
Yeah.
fantastically interesting go-to-market problem to solve. Reason we're on the podcast is because Verisoul has been making a lot of noise this year with some really exciting things. You guys did the Times Square ads. You have been, getting known for these mentalist dinners. I've had the privilege of being at actually two of those. Does a magic trick that I got myself in twice. And then of course, the Reds game in Cincinnati, which really, massive turnout, hundreds of people, in a lot of just really, really positive feedback there. So what I kind of want to talk about today is, you're selling a software, right? Typically that's done with a lot of, these kind of like overly caffeinated, high commission, high profile B2B AEs, quota crusher type A kind of, like tactical teams, right? Like SEAL Team 6 of sales. And it seems like instead y'all have opted for like a really good guerrilla marketing strategy. And I would just love to hear more about, why that seemed like a good fit for Verisoul. I believe I saw a LinkedIn post where you were talking about that there's a secret notepad somewhere full of the greatest marketing ideas of all time. And I just, I want to talk about the disruption in go to market that Verisoul is creating within marketing research that's a very traditional space.
It's a great question and a broad question. And so, I mean, first off, I think to your point around there's a bunch of different verticals that we can serve. It's also a very fun problem. And it's something that, takes a very creative approach to try to figure out, okay, how do you actually win inside of each vertical? What we've kind of seen in general is that, especially in market research, it's been a lot of the same messaging for a long period of time. People have kind of heard the same thing. It's a similar kind of profile of providers, people that have been in market research for a long time who have kind of seen this problem and then wanted to go and try to solve it. Whereas our approach has been kind of outside in, right? It's the team came from banking and identity companies, built a fraud prevention solution that's banking grade, and then actually entered the market research market. And so it is almost like a different approach entirely just to begin with. And then on top of that, we found is, yeah, these ideas of like guerrilla marketing stunts have been incredible for awareness. And a lot of what we want to drive initially was awareness, right? We knew the product worked really well. And at the time, we were a small team pre Series A. And so we didn't even have the money to go and try to hire, 20 different AEs, right? And so initially the thinking was, okay, how can we spend money in a very creative and smart way? So not the traditional sponsorship path, where maybe it takes a little bit more time and effort, but the ROI on that time and effort is there. And so, for example, I think the first splash we made was in 2025 at SampleCon. We decided to bring 200 boxes that were packed with a bunch of we had a chocolate bar that had golden tickets, and if you got a chocolate bar that had the Willy Wonka golden ticket, you can get AirPods or something else. Each box was a little bit different. There's actually someone who had gone in and we had all the boxes sitting out. Someone had rifled through about 50 boxes just looking for golden tickets to try to win like a AirPods Max or something. And so it created this buzz and this excitement even without spending that much money. And so that's kind of how it started was, we were pre-series A and just trying to get the word out there. Even after, we have 70 customers, we've realized that those types of marketing stunts have been extremely valuable from an ROI standpoint. My background coming from private equity is I care a lot about ROI, right? And so if we're going to spend money, we really will sit down and think through what are we actually going to get from the spend. So the Cincy Reds event was a great example where even though it was pretty expensive and Sebastian can hit on kind of the budgeting and the thought process and the goals for that. But we chatted through, okay, how much are we going to spend and what do we expect to happen from this? And the ROI was super clear. And so, Sebastian, I don't know if you want to talk about that at all around, some of the targets that we tried to hit and ultimately did hit.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a super fun event to plan, almost as much fun as it was to be there for the game. It actually started in a pretty roundabout way. So we were planning another dinner series, like Andrew, you've been to a few, planning a dinner series, deciding like what cities to go to again. And we are like, oh, well, we'd love to go back to Cincinnati, but we've kind of already done it. Cincinnati, we have a ton of customers there. We all like individually love Cincy for different reasons too. Like I've spent a fair amount of time there. I love the Great American Ballpark.
It's a sleeper town. It
It's
really is.
so good. Yeah,
It is.
best ice cream I've ever had, easily, at Graders. So we were just, like, planning a dinner series, and we're like, "Oh, there's San Francisco, there's New York. We'd love to do Cincy, but, we can't." And then we're like, "Oh, what if we do a baseball game?" You know, I love the Great American Ballpark. Joey is a Cubs fan, so he could root against the Reds. We could have, like, a great time there.
Mm.
It's rooting against the Brewers, to be fair.
True, true. And so we're like, "Oh, yeah, let's do a baseball game. Like, how much would 20 tickets cost?" Whatever. And then we were like, baseball games are fun. They've been done before. They're kind of like that, like, exclusive, like, fancy event. Maybe you get a box, free food, free drinks, which I love, by the way. Like, that's definitely a great time. We were like, what if we do it a little bit different? Like, what if we did something crazy, like got the first pitch? Like, how much would it cost for us to, like, pay for the rights to the first pitch? And so we reached out to the Reds, who were lovely to work with throughout the process also. And we're like, "Hey, like, Nick at the Reds, how much would it cost for the first pitch?" He was like, "Oh, that's impossible. Like, you can't do that. That would take, like, a sponsorship or something crazy like buying 1,000 tickets." And so we said, "Okay, okay, so we can't do that." And then we were sitting in our conference room at the old office, and the question then became like, "Well, we have to kick the tires on how much 1,000 tickets cost. We just have to." And then we started going down that rabbit hole and found that, like, it was something we could support if we got the community to really turn out. Because you don't want to buy 1,000 tickets to get the first pitch and only have like 100 people show up. And
Yeah.
so it went from like baseball game to we should have the first pitch to we need 1,000 tickets to in the end, like hosting 1,000 people was really the point of the event. We didn't go into it saying, "Let's buy 1,000 tickets." Like, it was a lot of steps to get there, and it ended in a super, super fun place because of that.
What was the final turnout? Do you know how many of the tickets were redeemed?
Redeemed, I'm not exactly sure. I think passed out, it was like around 750. I think there were around 400 to 500 people there, would be my guess. But yeah, it was super, super unique.
And the vast majority of those people were, market researchers
Mhm.
slash market research friends and family.
Right.
There was another chunk that we donated to some, like, local community groups. Some we handed out on the street. Turns out it's actually pretty hard to give out free tickets to a baseball game. And then we also, on our flight from Austin to Cincinnati, announced over the plane loudspeaker that we had some tickets to a Reds game. So we had some people who actually showed up who were on that flight.
Amazing. Amazing. So you had hundreds of market researchers show up. That has to be a record. It was definitely, kind of the I'm in the Cincinnati area, so it was the talk of my town at least, for a few days leading up and a few days afterwards. Joe, you started by saying, there needs to be a clear ROI on this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that I think I struggle with sometimes is that when I imagine myself in your shoes, right? You
Yeah.
in not to get too technical, but I'm in
Yeah.
sales, revenue ops,
No, no, no. Yeah.
with a passion of mine. You're dealing in a contract-based revenue system, right? So
Yeah.
if I am a client, you're trying to get me to renew, maybe there are some upsells, but generally, you're going to grow your revenue by getting new clients, not just by making your current clients feel really good. That's part of it, but, it's different than, like, for me, I travel all the time, and entertain clients all the time. I'm mostly seeing my current clients so that they
Mhm.
do more projects with us, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
to navigate issues, brainstorm, like, literally make their business better. I'm basically, like, consulting over a steak is kind of what I do when I'm out and about. Y'all have the mandate of getting new clients as well.
Yeah.
So, how did you even conceive the ROI for something like this? Because you
Yeah.
have like net new appointments that you could set, there's renewal percentages. Obviously, there's some kind of like just marketing, advertising, awareness ROI related to something this big.
Yeah.
Sebastian comes to you with this insane idea, Joey. How do you start to put the guardrails around the types of ROI that you need to see on taking 500 researchers and their families to a baseball game?
Totally. Yeah, you hit on a couple really interesting points, which is there's marketing both to existing customers. Like a lot of our customers were at the game. We probably had around, I don't know, in terms of people, a couple dozen people that were existing customers. And then also, how do you market directly to new customers, and also just the awareness benefit from posting on LinkedIn? What I would say, and kind of taking a step back, I think a lot of companies are pretty good at thinking about ROI and kind of return on investment when it comes to sales specifically. They'll say, okay, I hire this many salespeople and I give them these quotas, and their on target earnings is this amount, and we've got this quota to OTE ratio. Based on all these factors, I know for a fact that we're going to have a sustainable sales motion going forward. And that is how most companies think about growing, and especially investors will think about, like, okay, what is the customer lifetime value, and what is the customer acquisition cost? And that is what everyone's kind of thinking through, is that
Yeah.
ratio. What we've seen, and this is one of my first times actually going to marketing slash sales in general, is that marketing is in a lot of ways for us more strategic, and the most important thing that we do, even compared to sales, where if we can drive interest, the product sells itself. Because when people out and they try it for themselves, the conversion's around 90%. And so our goal is just for people to hear about Verisoul and then test the product. And if they test it, they generally convert. And so to us, our view is, in a lot of ways, it's a marketing problem that we're trying to solve. So going back to, like, okay, Sebastian comes to kind of the team and says, hey, I got this great idea and it's going to cost $20,000. What value is there? How do we get to 20K of value, right? One of the ways that we did that was around referrals. So in terms of who threw the first pitch, it was actually this referral. What's the word I'm looking for? It was essentially like a drawing or a raffle where you got entries based on how many referrals you made. So we ended up getting 27 referrals, email intros to potential customers, and a few of those are currently in the pipeline right now at deal sizes between 20 and 50K. And so, if you think about, okay, if any of those convert, the lifetime value of those customers is going to be several 100K. Even if only hit, it would actually pay for the entire event. So that's the way to think about it, is even if it's just one, based on referrals alone. In addition, you have the top of funnel marketing value. The LinkedIn recap video had thousands of impressions. A lot of people that are currently, in the marketing funnel or are customers, and it makes them proud to be Verisoul customers. One of the things, like you mentioned, a lot of your time is spent kind of selling existing customers. For us, generally, it's like an automatic renewal. We don't necessarily think about it in terms of selling existing customers. We think about making existing customers super happy. And we care a lot about customers like you all loving the product and enjoying it. And that's why, we focus a ton on customer solutions, making sure that when you have any questions, we can answer them right away. And what ultimately happens longer term is there's a lot of word of mouth in the industry because everyone knows everyone. And so, for example, in Q1, 40% of all of our deals actually came through word of mouth or referrals.
Wow.
So that's kind of been the flywheel for us, where we actually don't have any salespeople on the team. Like, Sebastian runs go to market within market research, which, as you can tell from this baseball event, is really a marketing role. He will also take any demo, but we don't necessarily invest resources just in sales. It's always a combined sales and marketing approach.
Does that drive your investors crazy?
Yeah. So
You don't have to get into that too much, but my last role, I was at a syndicated research company that operated like a SaaS company. We were a mashup with PE, and so we had major private equity investors who were heavily involved in the business. We had a fantastic operating partner. It was like, I think he's probably, if not the best, he's got to be in like the top 10 salespeople, period. He was phenomenal. But as far as just like, looking at those metrics of like, where's the OTE, how many calls, what can we do to boost this metric here and this metric here and this metric here, and like, versus you almost have this, okay, 40% word of mouth. Well, how do we get people to talk about us more, right? That's marketing, not sales. Okay, right. How do we sell people? Well, we don't have to. It's 90% conversion.
Right, exactly.
It's just a very unique problem. Is that challenging, or are you just kind of like enjoying these facts that mean a lot of new business for you, but over the course of, I'm sure your goal is not to double the size of the company. You want to 10x or 20x or 50x the size of the company. Is that like a challenge for you all to kind of wrap your, because I'm trying to wrap my head around it, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, what I would say is this in terms of like some trends in software more broadly. A lot of companies have switched from a sales-led motion to a product-led motion, where, for example, a lot of products now are self-service. You go on the internet, you can have a free trial, and you can start using Claude right away, right? You can sign up yourself. You don't ever have to have a demo. And so a lot of companies actually there has been a shift more towards marketing versus just sales. What's unique about Verisoul is it is a fairly complex technical product, and so you do need to have that sales process because it's very helpful just from like a almost like a customer training in a lot of ways of like, hey, it's an onboarding process, but we actually are kind of emulating what PLG and AI software companies are doing in terms of their marketing and in terms of their approach. And so our investors have been really great in trusting us. And I think as part of that trust, a lot of it is we set very lofty goals. And so far we've been hitting them. If we don't hit them, I don't know how the conversations would go about not hiring salespeople. Maybe that would be a little different. But at least right now we've been hitting them. And so we've 2.5x just this year. And so they of course love to see that. And they trust the team. I there was definitely a couple conversations around we had a plan that included salespeople and then ended up changing it to go-to-market directors and change kind of the whole stack of the team. But they're great investors that are really, they listen first and talk second. And when they talk, they've really kind of sage-like advice. And they've trusted the team with this approach.
Yeah, and I will say, there are so many good parts about the sales motion as somebody who is responsible for the go-to-market for an entire vertical market research, which is obviously our favorite vertical. But it sometimes it is tough when there's no like lever to pull. There's
Hmm.
no like, oh, if we simply do this motion more and put more time and invest more money into it, like we know that the line is going to go up. It's a lot it has to be a lot more strategic and longer focused. Like, ironically, even though our execution is like super tight, super iterative on like a pretty short time frame, we have to think about impacts of our behaviors and our actions on like a much longer time frame. So it's pretty funny because we do operate super tactically as that like you reference like a SEAL team 6 strike force.
Yeah.
We have to like do these things and then just wait. And like we know that it will result in like pipeline sales, pilots, all this, but no direct levers to pull like that.
Right. But you do have some very fun boxes to open. They're levers to pull. I
Yeah.
know at one of the conferences, I believe you had a bunch of like children's toys and things that people should
Mm.
make. And the first thing that my kids ask me whenever I get home from a trip is, "Daddy, did you get us anything?" The seventh time that I was coming back from Atlanta or Philadelphia or I go to New Orleans, you can have a stuffed alligator. I go to Denver, we'll get a little bear or something like that. There are some things like that, but that just really resonated with me because you're just thinking like, okay, like what makes an impact for people. I want to get to this notepad. Joey, I need to hear the story that there is a treasure trove of guerrilla marketing ideas somewhere. Tell us the story. How many pages into it are you? Is this going to be the next, 3 years of our lives that Verisoul just has greatest hit after greatest hit?
3 years, hopefully more than 3 years. Yeah.
I just mean of
Um,
the marketing ideas before you got to start writing more. Oh, I'm sure you have more than 3 years in the tank. Yeah.
Yeah. I essentially there's like a note page that Henry and I have that it's called Goofy Marketing Ideas. And there's 3 tiers of how goofy it is. First tier is not that goofy, and it's like fairly traditional marketing campaigns that, make sense. They're good tactics to try, or maybe somebody else has done it before. Then there's a second tier and then a third tier, which is kind of the extremely ridiculous ideas that we've done in the past. I think the baseball game would fall into that category of buying 1,000 tickets and getting the first pitch. I think the Verisigs, the branded Sigs, was also
Mm.
one that fall into that category. And essentially, what it is, there was a newsletter that we read a long time ago that said, "Hey, if you're the first marketing hire, the first thing you should do is make a channel in Slack with everyone, engineers, with product, with C-suite, whoever, and call it marketing ideas." And it was Tom Orbach that had this idea. And essentially, anyone can post crazy ideas in there all the time. And especially, I mean, some of the best ideas come from people without marketing backgrounds because they're thinking out of the box, they're trying things differently. We have some pretty insane ideas in there. I'll give you a couple that we've thought about doing, and I
I
can't
was
share.
hoping you would. I was hoping you would. What's something that you've been scared to do or that's like too far outside the box that might happen?
It's a good question. And there's one that immediately comes to mind because we've talked about this so many times. So there's this really nice golf course here in Austin called ACC that a lot of tech execs play golf at. And we had this idea in the middle of the night to go out on a boat with like a slingshot or like a water balloon launcher and launch thousands of Pro V1s with the Verisoul logo and a QR code onto the course so that whoever's playing, like shoot them into the trees, whatever. So whoever's playing the course will eventually discover these golf balls that have a QR code that links to what we do and why we can help with like the local tech companies in Austin. And a lot of the value of this would, of course, be like the ridiculous video of this done, like
Yeah.
the dramatization of like shipping a bunch of video or a bunch of golf balls onto the course. We end up not doing it because you get in a lot of trouble for that. And also, I mean, I don't know. It's a nice course that you wouldn't want to be like banned from for life, but was one of the ideas. Another one was that, buildings every now and then get demolished and there's like demolition crews. And we've thought about either sponsoring it or putting like a one of our competitors on there or something as a joke. And then when they blow up the building, it would be like a physical building that blows up with a logo. That one is also pretty insane. It would be really expensive. So that one and also we don't want to like be too anti competition. We're more pro customer, right? So ended up not going that route, but that's just two of them. But we've got, I mean, dozens.
Well, instead of covertly launching them onto the course, you could always give those golf balls to a 25 handicapper like me, and trust me, they'll end up in the rough and on the course. So
We have done that. If you want some golf balls, we can ship them to you. But we be ones in anticipation of this.
yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. So how do you decide which of these ideas are kind of like next on the docket? Is marketing like a weekly meeting? Is it, is something that you all just kind of do? Not is marketing something you do when you have time, but when you're thinking about like a big splash,
Yeah.
something really creative, how does that fit into the rhythm of course, onboarding customers, helping existing customers? You're probably constantly developing the technology, right? There's a lot of things
Yeah.
into your day to day. At what point do you decide that the chief strategy officer, the go to market, and the CEO are going to fly to Cincinnati for a baseball game with 500 people?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of it seems random to some degree, but it's actually extremely strategic for us. And so, for example, we focus all of our goofy marketing stunts are tied very specifically to an audience. And so it's never something that's just like randomly done. It's like this idea, like why Cincy? We had a ton of customers there, of course. And then in addition, one of the big things that we've been kind of working on is the potential to work directly with brands. And
Mm.
so we're in pilots with several brands right now in the market research space. I can't say which ones, but we're starting to work with a bunch of them. And obviously, there are a lot of big brands in Cincinnati. And so that was part of the thinking of, okay, we've got the audience, brands in Cincy. How do we get in front of that audience? And that's kind of how that, like, this big idea started. So Sebastian, I mean, you can kind of walk through this one, but Sebastian was like, okay, this is, he was doing the marketing strategy for the market research vertical and created this like pretty robust market map of where is everyone located at the top 200 companies. Literally like, okay, find the two or three personas that generally map to Verisoul. Look up those people across all of our prospects. Map all of them by city. So we have a database of like, okay, LA, 22 people, SF, 15 people, whatever it is. And then what are the big strategic initiatives and priorities that we have in market research? In this case, a lot of it was around brands. And so that's kind of how it started. But Sebastian, if you want to jump in, I mean, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, no, this was one of the first things we did when I joined. Verisoul was build out this super robust market map. And at the time, it took a lot of work, a lot of effort. Like cross-referencing which companies should be included on there, including prospects, including like active customers, and then just like days and days and days of going through LinkedIn and mapping these people. Like it's not just like, oh, who are our top 200 prospects by companies. It's not even who are the top 200 prospects by people. It's like literally who are the top 200 companies and who are the 10 to 15 people at those companies who could buy Verisoul and where are those people located. So that's been a really useful resource for us as we plan in-person events, which have been super, super good for us, like not even just conferences.
Yeah, and one thing that jump in on in terms of the in-person events, like our software is built on trust, right? We're touching whether it's market research and it's the survey taker, or whether it's an AI software company and it's the person that's signing up and could potentially be the customer. We're interacting, you know what I mean? In terms of our JavaScript, our SDKs that are sitting on websites or sitting on apps, we're interacting with the end user. And so it's built on trust. And a lot of that trust comes from in-person events and also, you know, word of mouth and social proof. And so that's kind of how we've thought about our events and what we're trying to drive. And in terms of your question too around, do you prioritize these goofy ideas and there's one after another? The answer is actually no. The thinking is more, we have this backlog of ideas. And so when we come up with, okay, our next initiative is going to be this sub segment, we'll revisit that set of ideas and brainstorm a ton more and say, are there any that are applicable? So for example, the Vera SIGs idea was something that we had come up with over a year earlier, like 8 months earlier. And it was at a different conference. We were like, oh, wouldn't it be funny? There were a lot of people that essentially were kind of hanging out outside. We're like, oh, I like, wouldn't it be funny if we had branded SIGs for them because they were all smoking? And there a lot of them were from Europe. And we decided, okay, next European conference, we'll do it. And then of course, SMR was in Prague. You know, if you were at the conference, like there were hundreds of people at any given time smoking, and people were really appreciative and found it very funny. And so it ended up being a great little stunt.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Especially going over to Europe, where of course your, incidence of tobacco usage and smoking is going to be higher.
Right, right.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So you mentioned you're up 2.5x this year. You're up to 70 marketing research clients. Is marketing research your strongest vertical? What's next for Verisoul? What are your goals? Obviously, kind of taking MR fraud detection by storm. But what's next on the warpath here?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, it is our strongest vertical. There are kind of three core verticals that we play in today. So advertising and especially incentivized ads look a lot like market research. So we do it in that space, and a lot of market research customers actually kind of stem both. For example, Swagbucks or Cashkick, they're doing surveys, but also there's other ways to earn on their platforms. So we'll work with a lot of companies in that space as well. And then AI software is another one that we work with a ton of companies in that space, whether it's Clay, whether it's Augment Code or Warp. There's a bunch of companies that they have free trials, and each free trial costs a couple dollars. And so they get, 100,000 bogus signups in a month. And so I'd say our first focus is really doubling down on those key verticals, right? There's no plan to ever leave market research or to ever not invest a lot of time there. In fact, Sebastian's entire focus right now as our first go-to-market director is in the market research space. But in terms of adjacencies, there's 4 or 5 that it could make a ton of sense. And we have traction in all of them. And so a lot of it's trying to figure out, okay, where do we have the most traction? Where does it make sense to kind of go to next and really go deep in that vertical? So, for example, I mentioned TrustCon at the start. There are a lot of social platforms like LinkedIn, like Yelp, where there's a lot of people that upload fake content, like Indeed, where there's these marketplaces. And so we work with Visco right now. It's like the video social editing platform. I don't know if you ever remember
Sure.
that, like 2010, but
I wasn't sure that was still around. Yeah.
they made a big comeback and kind of pivoted more to like their own social media site for professional videographers and photographers to upload content. And so, of course, when you're uploading content, there can be issues there. And so they're one of our kind of, I would say, beachhead customers in the social space. But there's a number like gambling, obviously, there's a ton there. There's fraud in so many different places. And if you try to target all of them at once, you're going to fail. But if you make a splash in one specific market where the competition's weaker, it can make a lot of sense. And really, I mean, especially when you start going to those verticals, it's the same competition, whether it's banking, e-commerce, or gambling. Like you kind of hear the same names, and it is stronger, but some of their solutions work better or worse by vertical.
Well, gentlemen, I know that you are both planning weddings at the moment. So congratulations to you both. I just got married about 2 months ago. So I know that you have a million things to do. Any plans to attack the wedding vertical next? How would Verisoul
You-
apply there? I'm mostly kidding, but if anything comes off the cuff, that could be fun too.
There actually is. I mean, Sebastian can go first because his wedding's sooner. But there actually is something interesting, which is the knot, where you have people that are making these websites. A lot
Mhm.
of people have fake registries, and their goal is to try to people into like giving them money. And there's a lot of fake brides. It's just like huge fake bride problem. There was an Atlantic article about this a couple years ago. But actually, oddly enough, fraud is a problem, of course, in the wedding industry. It's truly everywhere. But that's what would you change if you could? Is there anything that you would fix if you could?
About the wedding industry,
Yeah,
man.
fraud or otherwise.
Gosh, I'll have to come back to you in 17 days after I'm married, Joey. I can't even decide yet. It's all so perfect. But yeah, Andrew, I'll say like anywhere you're sending strangers money on the internet is where we sit. So hey, maybe weddings are next. Joey, what would you change about the wedding industry? One thing.
It's a great question. Lack of transparent pricing.
Oh
Ac-
gosh, yes.
Actually, I think the worst part is the vendors that are like adjacent to the wedding industry. Like, I
Mm,
understand why a restaurant, if you're doing a huge reservation, costs like, I don't know, $1,000. But the second it's a rehearsal dinner, it's 15,000. Like that, it feels so unfair. It drives me insane. That's probably
Yeah,
the one thing.
it is. They know you'll pay.
yeah, I know. I absolutely agree with you too. Having just gone through my so yeah, if there's literally different prices if you were to book a venue for a concert or a corporate meeting versus if it's for your wedding. And man, getting hit with that 22% service fee mandatory on top of everything. And I'm like, everything? The napkin has a 22% attached to it. It was just it boggled the mind as we continued to go down that path. Ultimately worth every penny. I will say that it was worth every penny, but it definitely made my head spin around a couple times.
Yeah, I actually did an experiment when I was buying my suit for the wedding. So I had it custom made from a place that weeks before I had bought a suit from. So like rack versus custom. And the suit that I was buying, the first one was like for a different wedding where I was a groomsman, right? So I had the price on that one. And when I got my wedding suits, like my actual suit I'm getting married in, I didn't tell them it was for my wedding until after I had the price. And wouldn't you know it, I was paying less for that custom made suit than the one that I bought for a separate wedding. It was
Very
boggled
interesting.
the mind. I just stopped telling people this is for a wedding until after I get the price quote. Started doing that way too late in the process, though. That was a late discovery.
Well, and unfortunately kind of difficult to do with the venue, right? Or like a wedding cake or something where it's inherently wedding related. But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for all the time. It's really been an enjoyable conversation, a little bit of a departure from our constant stream of AI and data quality topics, but something that is, interesting and pertinent to everyone in our space. Before we go, is there anything that you'd like our listeners to know about Verisoul as far as maybe there's upcoming products, upcoming events, or anything like that?
And what I would say is in terms of like upcoming products, the team has just invested all the Series A money into the product. And so what I would say is, well, that plus, 1,000 tickets for the baseball game. But what I would say is, if you haven't tried out Verisoul, maybe if you have in the past, you've probably already seen that there are, huge upgrades coming. We have recently completely revamped our networking intelligence. And so a lot of our existing customers already know this. But if anyone is ever interested in trying it, you can always reach out to me or Sebastian, and happy to walk you through some of those upgrades.
Absolutely. And where can people find the two of you?
LinkedIn or just through the website. if you book a demo, it's going to go straight to me and Sebastian. It doesn't go to anyone else. So we'll see every single demo that comes through.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks so much.